My husband came home 5 hours early, and I froze. The living room was dimly lit, the golden glow of the setting sun cutting through the blinds, casting long shadows on the walls. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the quiet hum of the television in the background. The air felt thick, suffocating, like I'd walked into a trap I hadn't even realized was set. In front of me stood two men. One was my husband, his face unreadable, his eyes locked onto me like a predator assessing its prey. The other, he shouldn't have been here. He shouldn't have ever been in my home. But he was. And I had no way to explain why. Silence stretched between us like a taut rope, ready to snap at any second. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. My husband didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood there watching. The weight of his gaze crushed me, more unbearable than if he'd screamed. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mind scrambled for an excuse, an explanation, anything that could make this moment disappear. But before I could open my mouth, memories came flooding back. How had I let this happen? A few days ago I still believed our marriage could be saved. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that every couple goes through this. I made excuses. He was tired, stressed, distracted. But deep down I felt it. The distance. The way he barely looked at me, the way he came home later each night, the way his words felt rehearsed, forced, as if he was playing the role of a husband instead of being one. I tried harder. Cooked his favorite meals. Dressed up when he came home. But nothing changed. He remained cold, distant, unreachable. I started watching him the way a stranger would, searching for cracks, for signs of who he had become. And then his best friend started noticing me in a way he never had before. His compliments lingered, his conversations felt warmer, closer, more personal. And then the new guy at my husband's office appeared. Charismatic, confident, charming in a way that was effortless. The kind of man who knew his effect on people. And just like that, everything in my life shifted. I didn't know then that this would change everything. The restaurant was dimly lit, warm, intimate. The kind of place where secrets lingered between flickering candlelight and hushed conversations. His eyes met mine across the table, steady, unreadable, holding a weight I hadn't noticed before. The wine in my glass trembled slightly as I lifted it, my hands unsteady. We had been talking for over an hour, but at some point the conversation had shifted, softened, turned into something dangerous. His voice was lower now, his words slower, his attention locked onto me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I laughed at something, too loudly, too nervously. My pulse raced. The way he looked at me made my skin flush, made me forget for a moment that this was wrong. Then it happened. I leaned in first. A hesitation, a breath, a pause, and then his lips met mine. Warm, firm. A shock of electricity ran through me. My mind screamed to stop, but my body, my heart, my everything refused to listen. And in that single moment I felt alive. Until the guilt hit me like a train. It started with a look, the kind that lingers a second too long, the kind that makes you question if you imagined it. He was confident, the kind of man who never had to try, the kind who could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. I noticed him first at a company event. His voice smooth, his presence undeniable. My husband introduced us, but he barely acknowledged me, just a polite nod, a brief smile. Then days later everything shifted. He found me alone at the coffee bar, his tone casual, his charm effortless. He asked questions my husband hadn't asked in years. How I was feeling, what made me happy, what I wanted in life. His attention was intoxicating, his interest undeniable. Every word he spoke wrapped around me like silk, pulling me closer. My heart pounded, but not from fear. For the first time in years I felt seen. When he asked for my number I hesitated. I should have said no. I should have walked away. But I didn't. Instead I typed it in, hit send, and felt something inside me shift forever. Maybe this was a sign to stop. That night, for the first time in forever, my husband pulled me in without hesitation. His touch was soft, familiar, the kind that once made me feel safe. His lips brushed against mine, slow, deliberate, as if he was remembering something we had both forgotten. I melted into it, into him, into the moment that felt almost too perfect to be real. His hands cupped my face, his breath warm against my skin, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like his wife again. Everything else disappeared. My guilt, my doubts, the stolen kiss in the restaurant, the number I never should have given. Maybe this was my chance to fix everything before it was too late. Maybe it wasn't too late at all. Then my phone vibrated. A sharp, intrusive buzz against the silence, against the fragile moment we were caught in. My heart stopped. His arms were still around me as I pulled away, glancing at the screen. One new message. My chest tightened. Thinking about you. And just like that, reality came crashing back. The hotel room was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt dangerous. The city lights flickered through the window, casting soft shadows on the sleek furniture. He sat across from me, his gaze heavy, his presence intoxicating. His voice was low, smooth, the way he said my name sending chills down my spine. A casual touch, his fingers barely brushing my wrist, yet it sent my pulse racing. I knew I shouldn't be here. I knew I should leave. But I didn't move. You seem tense, he murmured, leaning in just enough. My breath caught. The space between us was dissolving, and for a moment nothing else existed. Then my phone rang. The sound cut through the air like a knife. My stomach twisted. I pulled it from my bag, my heart pounding. My husband's name lit up the screen. I swallowed hard and answered. Hey, I forced a smile into my voice. Where are you? His tone was calm. Too calm. With a friend, I lied. Then something in the mirror caught my eye. A shadow. A figure. Someone was watching us. Something was wrong. My husband wasn't acting angry. He wasn't distant. He was calm, too calm. He kissed me on the cheek in the morning, asked about my day, smiled at me over dinner like nothing had changed. But that was the problem. Something had changed. I could feel it. His eyes lingered too long, his questions felt too precise, too measured. It was like he was waiting for something. Then there was his best friend. He had always been around. Casual texts, quick check-ins, friendly smiles. But suddenly nothing. No calls, no jokes, no stolen glances. Just silence. I tried to reach out, but he barely looked at me. When he finally did, his expression was blank, unreadable, like I wasn't even there. And then, my biggest mistake, he was gone. The colleague. The man who had pulled me into this mess. His number was disconnected. His office was cleared out. No messages. No trace. It was as if he had never existed. The air around me felt thick, suffocating. Every move I made felt watched. My skin prickled. Something was happening. I just didn't know what. I didn't know we were being watched. Desperation drove me to his door. My husband's best friend. My last lifeline. My hands were shaking when he let me in. His apartment was dim, quiet, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I told him everything. The strange way my husband was acting, the silence from people who once felt familiar, the gnawing sense that something was closing in. He listened, arms crossed, face unreadable. Then when I couldn't hold it in any longer, I broke. Tears welled up, and before I could stop myself, I leaned into him. His hands found my arms, steadying me, grounding me. The warmth of his body against mine was intoxicating, a lifeline in the chaos. Then without thinking, I kissed him. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry, laced with fear and regret. Then the door creaked. I pulled away, heart slamming against my ribs. In the doorway stood my husband. His expression was unreadable, his eyes dark, cold. My breath caught in my throat. He had seen everything. He didn't yell. He didn't move. He just stood there staring. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. My pulse pounded in my ears as I struggled to find words, but nothing came. My husband's face was unreadable. No rage, no betrayal, just a quiet, terrifying stillness. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he exhaled, his voice low, steady. I knew. This whole time. My stomach dropped. A cold wave of dread crawled up my spine. I shook my head, my lips parting to deny, to plead, but he didn't give me the chance. Without another word, he stepped aside, revealing his laptop on the table. The screen was open. Photos. Video. Time-stamped. Undeniable. My breath caught in my throat. Images of me, at the restaurant, at the hotel, standing too close, looking too comfortable. Then the video, grainy, silent, but unmistakable. My legs buckled. My world collapsed. I turned to him, searching for mercy, for anything, but he just watched, detached, like I was a stranger. The truth was, I wasn't his wife anymore. I was just a mistake he had been waiting to expose. Now I know what it feels like to lose everything. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just closed the laptop, grabbed his keys and walked out. No words, no second chances, just the quiet sound of the door shutting behind him. I wanted to chase after him, to beg, to undo everything, but my body wouldn't move. I sat frozen, staring at the empty space where he had stood, where my marriage had existed just moments ago. I tried calling his best friend. No answer. Another call. Straight to voicemail. The one person who had once looked at me with warmth now acted like I had never existed. Then the final blow. I dug through my messages, searching for the colleague who had started this mess. But his number was disconnected. My stomach twisted. A sinking realization hit me. He was never real, not in the way I thought. My husband had hired him to test me. And I had failed. My phone buzzed. One new message. My hands shook as I opened it. Now you know what it's like to be betrayed. I had lost everything.